You've had this conversation with Claude before. You explain how your company writes a status report. You paste in last week's version as an example. You remind it that the finance section always comes before the risks, and it does a lovely job. Then next week, you open a new chat and you do the whole thing again. That's the real cost of working with AI without skills. You're not paying in money, you're paying in re-explaining. A skill is how you stop. You write the instructions down once in a specific format, and from then on, Claude just knows. In this video, I'll show you exactly what a skill is made of. We'll build one together from an empty folder. This is the mechanics, so whatever job you do, you'll be able to build your own. Let's kill the mystery first because people assume this is programming. A skill is a folder. That's genuinely it. Inside that folder, there's one file that has to exist called SKILL.md. That file is just Markdown. It's the same plain text you'd write in any notes app. Everything else in the folder is optional. There's no install, there's no code to compile. There's no plugin to publish. If you can write a document explaining a task to a new colleague, you can already write a skill. The format is just how you hand that document to Claude, so it picks it up at the right moment. Now, the format looks fussy at first, and there's a good reason for it. Stay with me here because this is the bit that makes everything else make sense. Claude has a limited context window. Every skill you install competes for it. So skills load in 3 stages. Stage 1 is the metadata. That's just the name and the description, and it's always loaded. It costs about 100 tokens per skill. Stage 2 is the body of your skill file. That only loads when the skill actually gets triggered. Stage 3 is any extra file you've bundled alongside it. Those cost you absolutely nothing until Claude decides to open one. That's why you can have 50 skills installed and pay almost nothing for the 49 you're not using. Anthropic calls this progressive disclosure. Once you understand it, every rule that follows stops feeling arbitrary. Right, let's open a skill file up and look at the parts. At the very top, there's a block fenced by 3 dashes. That's called the frontmatter. It holds structured settings rather than prose. Only 2 of them are required, a name and a description. That's the whole requirement. Everything below that block is the body, which is ordinary Markdown. Headings, steps, examples, whatever helps. Think of the frontmatter as the label on the outside of the box. The body is the instructions inside it. Claude reads every label at startup. It only opens the box when the label matches what you've asked for. Let's do the name first because it has real rules and they'll reject your skill if you break them. It can be up to 64 characters. It can only contain lowercase letters, numbers, and hyphens. So no spaces, no underscores, and no capitals. Your folder name should match it exactly. And here's the one that catches almost everybody. Your skill name cannot contain the words Claude or Anthropic. They are reserved, so Claude-report-builder gets rejected. Weekly-status-report is fine. Anthropic's own guidance suggests naming skills as an activity, something like processing-invoices or writing-release-notes. It makes a library of them far easier to scan later. Vague names like helper, utils, or tools are the ones you'll regret in 3 months. Now the description. I want you to slow down on this one because this single field decides whether your skill ever runs. Claude might have 100 skills available. This description is the only thing it reads when deciding which one to pull in. So it has to answer 2 questions, not 1. What does this skill do and when should it be used? Most people only answer the first, then wonder why their skill never fires. There's a second rule that matters just as much. Write it in the 3rd person. The description gets injected into the system prompt. So I can help you write status reports reads as confusion. Drafts a weekly status report in the company format reads as a label. Compare these 2. Helps with reports is useless. It doesn't tell Claude what kind or when. Now the good one. Drafts the weekly project status report in the company format. Use when the user asks for a status report, a weekly update, or a progress summary. That second one names the job. Then it lists the exact phrases that should trigger it. You've got up to 1024 characters, so use them. Spend more time here than anywhere else in the file. Let's build one properly. I'm making a skill that writes release notes. I'm picking that deliberately because it isn't a project management task. I want you to see the shape, not the subject. First, I make a folder and I name it writing-release-notes. Lowercase, hyphens, no reserved words. Inside it, I create one file, SKILL.md. At the top, I open the frontmatter with 3 dashes. I set the name to match the folder exactly. Then I write the description. Writes release notes from a list of merged changes grouped by user impact. Use when the user asks for release notes, a change log, or a what's new summary. Notice it says what it does, and then it names the 3 phrases I actually say out loud. I close the front matter with 3 more dashes, and that technically is already a working skill. Everything from here makes it a good one. Below the front matter, I write the instructions. There's a judgment call here that Anthropic frames really well. Match how specific you are to how fragile the task is. If there are lots of valid ways to do the job, keep it loose and let Claude use its head. A few numbered steps is plenty. But if the task is brittle, if one wrong move breaks something, then be rigid. Give the exact command, the exact order, and say plainly not to deviate. The analogy they use is a robot on a path, an open field with no hazards, point in a direction and trust it. A narrow bridge with a drop either side, mark out every step. For my release notes, the grouping matters and the tone matters, but nothing breaks if it improvises. So I'll give it structure and a worked example and leave it room. That example is doing real work, showing one good input and its output teaches style far faster than describing the style ever will. There's a discipline here that separates skills that work from skills that bloat. Assume Claude is already clever. Only write down what it couldn't know. Your format, your rules, your preferences, your edge cases. Do not explain what a release note is. Every sentence that teaches Claude something it already knows is costing you context and buying you nothing. The working limit is 500 lines for the body. If you're pushing that, it's a signal to split. You move the detail into a separate file in the same folder and point at it from the main one. Something like, for the full style guide, see style-guide.md. Claude only opens it when it's genuinely needed, so it costs nothing the rest of the time. One warning though, keep those references one level deep. If your skill points at a file, and that file points at another file, and that one points somewhere else, Claude tends to skim rather than read. You'll get half the information. Everything links directly from the main file. So you've written it. Where does it go? That depends on where you use Claude, and this trips people up because skills don't sync between them. If you're in Claude code, it's just the file system. Drop the folder in .claude/skills inside your project if it's for that project, or in your home directory if you want it everywhere. It gets picked up automatically. In the Claude desktop app, open settings, then look under customize for skills, not under capabilities. It moved. And if you're building on the API, you upload it through the skills endpoint where it's shared across the whole workspace. Same folder, 3 destinations. Upload it wherever you actually work. Now, when you're on that skills screen, there's an add button, and it's worth knowing what's behind it. You get 3 routes. The first is upload a skill, which is the one we just built by hand. The second is write skill instructions, where you type them straight in. And the third is create with Claude. That last one is the easiest way in, and it's genuinely what Anthropic recommends. You describe the task in plain English, and Claude writes the skill file for you, correctly formatted. Here's why I still walked you through the anatomy first. When Claude drafts it, you need to be able to read it and know whether the description is specific enough to trigger. You'll usually want to tighten it. Knowing the parts is what lets you do that. Now test it, and test it the honest way. Start a completely fresh conversation and ask for the thing naturally, exactly as you'd normally phrase it. Don't say use my release notes skill, because that proves nothing. You're checking whether the description was good enough to trigger on its own. If it doesn't fire, the description is the problem 9 times out of 10. Go back and add the phrases you actually used. And the failures are predictable, so let me save you the time. Vague descriptions that never trigger. Explaining things Claude already knows. Offering it 5 different ways to do something instead of one default. Stacking references 3 files deep. And putting today's date, or for now, do it this way, into a skill you'll still be running next year. Anything time-sensitive rot. So that's the whole mechanic. A folder, 1 Markdown file, a name that follows the rules, a description that says what it does and when to use it, then instructions that only tell Claude what it couldn't already work out. Everything else is refinement. The honest reason to do this is that it compounds. Every skill you write is a task you never have to explain again. After a month of it, you've got a version of Claude that works the way your organization actually works. If you want a head start, I've put my own skills into the free pack. The ones I use for weekly status reports, risk registers, and meeting minutes. They're ready to drop straight into that folder. They're free at pmgts.uk/free. Have a look at how they're written, then change them until they sound like you. And if you'd rather see skills solving real project work instead of the mechanics, there's a card on screen for that one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.